All right, guys, we're back. Hopefully you took a nice little break. And we're going to talk about how species evolve. Okay, so sometimes populations change so much that organisms can no longer mate. Think about that definition of species. So you've got one species that splits into two or more. Does evolution always lead to speciation? It does not. So how does speciation really happen? Okay, so this is number 9 and 10. So we need to look at organisms that, if you think about the definition, can no longer mate in nature and produce viable, fertile offspring. So you're really looking at this part of the definition right here. The inability to produce viable offspring when members of two different populations mate. We call that reproductive isolation. If you took AP biology, we talked about mechanical isolation, maybe the parts don't fit. Behavioral isolation, like the fireflies whose flash patterns don't quite line up. Temporal isolation, the timing's not right. So these are organisms that can see each other, but they're not mating with each other. Geographic isolation is another variation on this. There's a mountain range between us. In this case, there's a large amount of land between us. So this is our example of a fox. If you look right here, that's going to migrate and split. Half goes north and half goes south. The one that ends up in the north looks a little different. Closer to the ground for warmth, thick fur, and blends in with the snow for white, or so it has white fur. The gray fox, which we have down here, is better suited and better camouflaged to a woodsy area and has more lightweight fur. Great example of geographic isolation. So geographic and reproductive isolation always lead to speciation. Evolution does not. Mutations do not. Predation does not. Keep that in mind. So if you're looking at the flip side of a coin, organisms can either change, which is speciation, or they go away. That's extinction. So we're looking at the process in which an entire species just ceases to exist. Does this happen normally? It absolutely does. There is something called background extinction. There are certain lifespans that we expect organisms to have. They're not designed to last for an eternity as a species. But when that rate increases, and listen to this, 10,000 times, that's when we call mass extinction. A loss of numerous species in a very short amount of time in terms of evolutionary history. This is number 11, by the way. We've had 5 mass extinctions in history. The most recent being the KT extinction between the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods. That's where the meteor hit. That's where the dinosaurs went extinct. We are currently in a 6th mass extinction, scientists think. What do you think it's being caused by? You're right, it's humans. We're calling it the Holocene extinction because it is human caused. And we're going to talk about this a lot more during class. But that's mass extinction. So organisms that tend to be vulnerable to extinction are a lot of times endemic species. This is number 12. We've mentioned endemic species before when we talked about mountains, right? They're homes to endemic species, so they're found only in one area. Number 12 asks, why are they vulnerable to extinction? Here's what you're going to write. Bullet point 1. They exist on islands and mountains and other unique areas. Bullet point 2. This is especially true as well. They exist in the tropical rainforest. If you remember tropical rainforest, we have stratified niches. We have organisms that have become very, very, very specialized in their own niche in order to avoid extinction. I'm sorry, in order to avoid competition. Competition is the word you should write down. And so 3rd bullet point, in the face of change, they are unlikely to be able to migrate or adapt to rapidly changing environmental conditions. The example that I want you to write down is the golden, that's a D, toad. The golden toad. I'm going to tell you the story when I show you the picture. Go, baby, go. There he is. There's the golden toad. So this guy lived in Costa Rica's Monteverde cloud forest in these like little pools of water, and he laid his eggs there. She laid their eggs there. He fertilized them until 1989. In 1989, we had some climate changes, and those little pools of water dried up. His habitat dried up, and this guy didn't make it. His niche was so specialized that he went extinct in 1989. And again, a very specialized location and an endemic species. All right, you can flip over your packet. We're now at number 13. Let's go back to species diversity, which we talked about in number 3. Again, we're looking at number and variety of species in a given area. So maybe I'm looking at a forest, and I'm saying, hey, we've got white pine, that's 1 species. Red pine, 2 species. Paper birch, 3. Black spruce, 4. Red maple, 5. Sugar maple, 6. Green ash, 7. Basswood, 8. And I'm counting species. That's species diversity. Compare that to species abundance. I believe your packet says richness. Can you please cross out richness in number 13 and write abundance instead? Abundance then is me going out there and counting. There's 8 black spruce. There's 24 sugar maples. There's 3 white pines. So you're looking at the number of organisms in each different species then in that area. So maybe we're talking about an area with high species diversity, high species richness. That's definitely your rainforest, your coral reef. How about low richness and low abundance? Think about that. If you said desert, if you said tundra, you're totally on the right track. What about high diversity and low abundance? A lot of different organisms, but not a lot of each. Maybe like a zoo. And then low diversity, high abundance, you're looking at maybe something like a farm field. You only have corn, but you planted a crap ton of it, right? There you go. So diversity varies. Diversity varies with distance from the equator and distance from sea level. That's latitude, that's altitude. We learned that when we learned about biomes. We mentioned some of these species-rich communities. Tropical rainforest, coral reefs. You know that ocean bottoms are high in nutrients. So they're going to be high in species diversity. And then also high in net primary productivity. That all goes together. Okay, we should be connecting dots. So number 14 asks about why species-rich ecosystems tend to be productive and sustainable. High species richness increases productivity, increases stability and sustainability. We have this nature's insurance policy that I mentioned already to protect against catastrophe. If one organism goes extinct, we've got others to fill in. Okay, so let's look at this. On the left, we have a national park in Washington. It's a temperate forest. We got some trees. We have a vague animal that I'm not sure if it's like a moose or an elk or a reindeer. What do you think? That's high diversity, high abundance. Versus the bottom right, which is a tree farm in Oregon, we have 1 type of tree there. I think it's a yellow birch. I can't really tell. We've got low species diversity, but we've got a whole lot of them. So we have high species abundance there. Okay, so we got through number 15. I'm approaching the 9-minute mark. So I'm going to stop it. You get to take another break, and then we're going to finish up with part 3.